acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Words from Mark's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 31 to 33. Mark writes, Then Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering, and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. As Jesus makes this first of two predictions in Mark's Gospel, anyway, about his death in our Gospel reading for today, he is almost immediately taken aside by Peter, one among his inner circle, if you will. And Peter begins to rebuke him. You might imagine the conversation probably went something like this. Jesus, what do you mean you are going to undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes? And what is all this nonsense about being killed and rising again 3 days later? Let's just pause here for a moment, Jesus, and let's just think about this, because this is certainly not in line with the hopes and expectations that we had for you as Israel's Messiah. And then Jesus, in what often seems like a very harsh rebuke of Peter, turns to the disciples, but yet addresses Peter and says to him, Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. You are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. You see, Peter's vision, Peter's expectation, and I'm sure the vision and expectation of the other disciples, their expectations for Jesus, for the life of God's Messiah, was certainly not one that ever entailed traveling down any road of suffering, or that this was supposed to be Israel's time of victory. But yet, looking back at his life, after the events of Good Friday, with the clarifying light of Easter, they would all come to see that these things about which Jesus spoke and which actually happened is precisely the absurd way in which God would fulfill the covenant promises which he made to Abraham, as we heard about in our Old Testament reading for today, the promises he made to Abraham for the sake of the world. This is the way that God will fulfill his will. But what I want to take the next few moments this morning to reflect on, what I want us to think about, is this disposition to which we are called as the people of faith. That is to set our mind on divine things and not on human things. That is, not to ignore this world as if we're walking around with our heads in the air, but to walk in this world by faith in the promises of this one whom we follow, and not according to what we see with our eyes. This, my friends, for us is necessarily a path of suffering, because we will rarely know ahead of time as disciples of Christ the details of the steps along this journey along which we are being led. All we will know is this one who leads us on, and the fact that he will remain faithful even when we are not. So we know that we can trust him. And so while we must indeed suffer, it is a kind of suffering that we must learn to endure willingly. And we do learn to endure willingly because the hope that we have in Jesus, the hope that we have in His faithfulness are not our own, far outweighs any suffering that we will ever encounter in this body. Now, I'm sure you've all heard the very common expression that hindsight is 20/20, right? Hindsight is 20/20. And in this expression is a simple recognition that things that we could not recognize in the moment, when we are actually there, when things are going on, often appear much clearer after the fact, when things have passed. We can look back with a kind of clarity which we did not have in the moment, and perhaps even think about what we would or would not have done differently if we had the opportunity to do it all over again. If we had the chance for a do-over, as we say. Right? And the same is often true in the life of faith for the believer. We are often better able to perceive in hindsight the ways in which God's hand has been at work in our lives and in our midst in ways that are often more difficult to perceive when we are right in the moment itself, when we are right in the middle of whatever it is that is going on. And in such moments, we cannot trust our eyes. It's a hard saying, but we cannot trust our eyes. We cannot always trust what we see, because very often we only see what we want to see. We only see what we are willing to see. Like the 99-year-old Abram and his wife Sarai, all we have to go on in such times is the faithfulness of the one who promises to bring us precisely to where we need to be in Him. That's all we have. But it is because of the fact that this God whom we worship has made Himself known to us in the history of creation, in our history, in our tangible world. It is because of this fact that this God has acted in the midst of the brokenness and the complexities of our human life in this world. It is because this God refuses to remain distant but come near that you and I are often given by faith a glimpse. We're given to catch a glimpse of the ways in which God's hand has been at work in our human history. It's like a thumbprint or a handprint or the footsteps left behind in the sand. It is for this reason that we may look back. We may indeed look back. And we may see with more clarity that the God who promised to make Abram the ancestor of a multitude of nations, to make him exceedingly fruitful, to give him a son in his old age, is the same God who brought all those promises to fruition in this Jesus Christ, whom we worship as our Lord. And my friends, this is so critically important for us to understand as we continue, not just in this liturgical season of Lent, but in this age of Lent in which we live. That the same God who was providentially at work then in the lives of Abraham and Sarah, is none other than the God who was providentially at work in and among us in Jesus Christ. And is the same God whose hand is still providentially at work in our midst, in our lives, in our community, in this church, even now. The same God yesterday, today, and forever. Now, we may not always be able to discern the big picture. Lord, how is your hand at work right now? We may not always be able to discern the big picture of how God is at work in our midst now, because we're in the moment. We're too close to the situation sometimes to get a good read. But we do know that God most certainly is at work. And so what we have to go on is the faithful voice of this one who says to us across the pages of time, you want to become my followers? Deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. You want to be my followers? Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And as I indicated a moment ago, answering this call necessarily takes us along a path of suffering. For we will rarely know ahead of time the details of the steps of that journey. We must trust Him with nothing less than the actual obedience of our lives. Now Jesus makes it clear that in this life of following Him, to which He invites us all, there are these two kinds of suffering that we will have to endure. The first is the sort of unjust suffering, if you will, that we will endure at the hands of others, sometimes even other believers, as He had to face the scribes and the Pharisees and the elders and teachers of the law. This is the kind of suffering we endure, not necessarily because we have done something wrong, but because others often see in us what they want to see. And this often prevents them from seeing us more truthfully as we are, and therefore prevents them from treating us more truthfully and justly as we all deserve. It is something that we were reflecting on this past week in our study of the Gospel of Mark, that we have to be ever so careful of the labels that we place on one another, because such labels blind us, therefore, to other things that don't fit within that label. This is the kind of misreading and consequent mistreatment of one another, which is nothing less than a kind of manifestation of our human sin. Our glasses need a bit, right? Cleaning up. Those lenses need to be cleaned. Because the prejudices that we harbor, our own unresolved hatreds and jealousies and insecurities, all these things affect how we see one another. But my friends, if Jesus had to endure such unjust suffering, then we should also expect to endure the same. And to do so not with bitterness, but to do so with humility and with understanding. Jesus Himself said to us, it is enough for the disciple, as we are, to be like the teacher. It is enough for the slave to be like the master. If they call the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more, He says, will they malign those of His household? Unjust suffering. The second kind of suffering we must expect to endure is that on account, or which comes on account of our commitment or our obedience to Jesus Christ. This is the kind of suffering we endure when, from the world's perspective, it seems that we are missing out, or that we are losing out on something because we have determined to take the Lord's side, as we are called to do. This is the kind of suffering, for example, where we determine maybe to go without certain creature comforts, because we have come to realize that it is not our money that we are spending, but that we are stewards of God's property. And so we are called to be good stewards of all that is given us. Now, you didn't get that new car, it's okay. You can get around the way you need to be. What can God do with that money that He's given to your trust? This is the kind of suffering we endure, for example, when we determine not to use any power that we have for our own advantage. Because we have come to realize that any power that we have is nothing more than the power of a servant, to be used for the honor and glory of God. You see, I think it is so unfortunate that so many believers have lost the capacity, have lost the sensitivity, have lost even the will to undergo this kind of suffering. Like Peter, we would much rather prefer to think that this life of following this Jesus, of really following him as his disciple is a life in which we may somehow avoid any notion of suffering, avoid any notion of dying to self, of laying down this life for his sake. And so once we rule those things out, then we lash out with a kind of maybe self-righteous vengeance in the face of unjust suffering. And when we hide our true identity as believers, whenever it seems like our commitment to Christ may cost us something. Maybe it will cost us the high impression that others have of us in this life. So what? Right? Or when it seems as though we may face some kind of oppression or some kind of opposition on account of our faith in him. But you see, I believe that in each of these kinds of suffering, Jesus' words of admonition to us arises from the same rebuke that he issued to Peter. That is, that we need always to set our minds on divine things and not on human things. Don't get confused about the reality of this world in which we live, for it is God's world. It is a world determined by and in and through the life of this Jesus Christ. Set your mind on divine things and not on human things. In this age and season of Lent, God calls and invites us to this disposition as the people of God, to set our minds on him whom the Father has sent to us from above. The way of God's working among us will often seem mysterious, hard to detect sometimes. Some actions we simply cannot discern in the moment. But yet, let us, in the grace that we have been given, let us embody this righteousness of faith in which we set our minds on divine things and not on human things, and we follow the voice of this one who is faithful and can be trusted. May it be said of us, as Paul says about Abraham, no distrust made them waver according to the promises of God. But they grew strong in their faith. That's us. They grew strong in their faith as they gave glory to God, being fully convinced that God is able to do exactly what he had promised. Let this be said of us in this place, and as we journey with our Lord through this holy season.